GM, good evening, good morning, wherever you are across the world. Today, I am joined by a very special person, Miguel Morel, CEO of Arkham Intel. Today, we're going to be diving into how they are de-anonymizing the blockchain, Arkham's vision, and much, much more. But I would like to start by saying thank you for joining me, Miguel. I'm very excited for the topics that we're going to be covering today. How are you feeling?
Feeling good. Thank you guys for having me. Excited to be chatting with your community.
Of course. I got onboarded by MVHQ early on. Some members were talking about the platform a couple months ago. And, once I got my hands on it, I was just like, wow, this is just so incredible, right? Being able to set up these dashboards that make you feel like you're the Dark Knight himself in the Batcave, It's just incredible. I really love the features that you guys have been rolling out, especially with the feature that came out today. Really like these new blocks that you mentioned, right? We have token prices, token flow, text boxes. I feel like we're going to start seeing a lot more threads involving these small features when they talk about new tokens, people transferring and whatnot. But before we dive into all that, could you just give us a brief description of what Arkham Intelligence is and what they do?
Sure. Yeah, of course. So I'm Miguel. I'm the CEO of Arkham. I started the company in early 2020, basically with a vision of creating a database where anybody would be able to access information about the owners of particular crypto wallets. I noticed that it was very common in the space, both on a retail level and on a professional level, to be curious about what wallets were doing on chain. And to have questions about, hey, we just saw this large movement happen or this interesting transaction happen on a particular blockchain with a particular wallet. But we don't have any information about who that wallet belongs to or additional context about what it might be doing. And so I figured that it would be an incredibly valuable project to embark on to actually try and at scale provide information about all of the wallets that exist on chain and who the people behind them are. And that is what Arkham is in the form of a software platform. So essentially, it's a way for people to very cleanly access a database of every single person and institution that we have tagged within the cryptocurrency industry. Look at their behavior, look at their transactions, their current crypto net worth, their balances over time, and so forth. And then do research and set alerts and be able to look at any interesting information about them.
Yeah, and I also want to say, right, like we see a lot of information on the blockchain, but up until recently, like it has been very difficult just to just process the data by yourself, right? We tend to see like a ZachXBT be a wizard on Twitter, right, and create these amazing threads marking like how funds are being moved or shady happenings that obviously happen in Web3. But I do feel like it would be imperative and a great movement forward in the space to give users the ability to create these dashboards so easily, right? I think that's like why you guys are pushing forward in that sense, right? Like creating a dashboard, it's pretty basic here, right? But I also feel like it can get pretty complex, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think that one of the things that we have sort of thought with respect to the features that we intend to ship within Arkham. Basically, I think that overall, we need to give people the ability to build something as simple as they want or as complex as they want. And that can be as basic as you just build a dashboard on Arkham where you take your top 5 favorite assets and then you like select the unit for, price and maybe like top holders. And then you just have a page that you check every single day where you look at the price of your favorite assets and then whether or not the top holders have moved any money, right? So that's kind of like the simplest level of this. And then on the top end, we have people who actually access our API. And then those people just get access to our endpoints directly. and then can create any kind of dashboard that they want by programming it using our own data. So that's been the kind of goal with Arkham overall. It's to allow people to, depending on their level of sophistication, build something very simple or build something very advanced.
Right. Essentially, you're giving the users the tools to create, as big as a project as it can be or as simple as it can be. And I think you guys are doing an amazing job attaining that goal as of currently. So I do want to ask you, what are some of the long-term goals that you have for Arkham? Let's say 5 to 10 years.
So I think that because that's a pretty long timeline, right? On that 5 to 10 year range.
Absolutely. I mean, 1 year in crypto is like an eternity.
Yeah, definitely. June 2022 was a very different time from where we are today. So yeah, so I think like let's say on that 5 year kind of long term thinking time range, I think that my vision is that we will eventually be the go-to search engine and tool and kind of repository for people looking to access on-chain information. Right now, there are, other kind of blockchain analytics tools that we're all familiar with and have always used, like something like Etherscan, for example. But I think that in the long run, we are going to build something that can completely displace that with a more kind of advanced toolbox with kind of labeling first rather than the raw blockchain data first, right? I think Etherscan starts with kind of raw blockchain data and has slowly built up its feature set versus we started with just how many labels could we possibly get in order to eventually just eliminate the concept of the blockchain address and instead only talk about the people and institutions that are making the trades. And that's our overall vision, and that's what we did from the very beginning. And so I think it's just an overall different way of thinking about it. So I think in that 5 year kind of timeline, I suspect that people will stop using block explorers and will instead just use a tool like Arkham because it's so much more helpful.
Yeah, I mean, you'll get to the point where people are just saying, "Oh, did you check that on Arkham?" Right? Like, I feel like that's what we do now for like checking transactions. Like, send me the Etherscan transaction, and
yeah,
as we start using these tools day to day, it just becomes kind of like the go-to, per se.
Yes, definitely.
So, how would you say you differentiate yourself from other data platforms that are currently, taking on the market?
Yeah, so I think that for me, the main kind of difference is the labeling and just how much coverage we have. Like, it's about 80% of all blockchain transactions we have labeled across the chains that we support on average. So that's quite a lot. So I would say that's kind of like the foundation. And then the tier above that is then actually our grouping by entity rather than by address, right? So when you use Arkham, you're searching for people by name, you're searching for institutions by name, you're searching for exchanges, trading firms, et cetera, all by name. And that is as opposed to searching by address and then attempting to find the owner of the address, right? So it's kind of it's a kind of one to many approach rather than searching the many just to find the one. And I think that is a big differentiator.
Yeah, and I will say that it's actually amazing just diving into the platform and just being able to search somebody on Twitter, right? And understand like, okay, maybe this is what they were working on or like what they've been interacting with. So it gives you a lot of transparency. Now, I would love to jump into before we jump into that, I did want to ask you, let's say that I'm new to Arkham. Where would you recommend somebody to start, right? The platform can be a little daunting for some people. So tell me about like your favorite tool or feature that you would recommend for new users.
So I think that the number one place I would recommend people to start is on Arkham's Twitter, because that will actually showcase a bunch of use cases, both from us and also from our users, right? We'll very frequently kind of retweet whatever people post about like threads or use cases for Arkham or examples of how to use it, because it then kind of makes our Twitter a kind of central, almost like library of every possible use case of Arkham if you just kind of scroll through it, right? Rather than it just being some kind of like announcement board. So I would say start there and look at all of the use cases and how people are currently using Arkham. Second to that, I would recommend our YouTube because we have a bunch of tutorials on there. And then third, I would recommend people just jump in and just start searching for stuff, right? Just start searching for people, start searching for trading firms, start searching for exchanges, and then just play around with the platform so you start to see what kind of information is available. And then you'll realize that when you have questions about things that you might be able to get answers from on-chain data, then you'll realize like, oh, maybe Arkham has access to that information and I can go and I can make the searches there, right? So like, for example, there's been a bunch of like regulatory FUD in the past 2 days where essentially there's been bad news about exchanges. And there's been a bunch of people who have questions of like, okay, does this mean that there's a bunch of like assets flowing out of the exchanges? Like maybe I want to be monitoring that in case like something risky happens or there's a run or, you know, whatever. And the only way that you can get access to that info is on chain. You need a platform that knows what all the exchange wallets are and then monitors them for their outflows, right? And so in that sense, knowing that Arkham contains that information, even with the kind of recent events that we've seen this past week, now you know to check the chain and to check Arkham to see the answer to your question.
That's perfect. That's perfect because it actually intros into my next question, which was diving into the importance of transparency in crypto, right? We've had these what feels like cataclysmic events with these central exchanges. I mean, FTX, what's happened with 3AC, you know, mismanagement of funds. Obviously, there's a lack of transparency. So why do you believe that there's a need for more detailed information on entities and individuals as well involved in crypto?
So the number one thing that will cause this market to grow and to actually reach increased adoption is trust. Without trust, people are not willing to move money around. That's just that's the reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that crypto for a long time has had this negative reputation of being this kind of shadowy underworld of like scammers and very kind of negative news and, you know, a bunch of people who are all, you know, stealing from each other and grifters and so forth, like that needs to go away. We actually need to destroy that narrative and bring about what is actually the case, which is that it is a new financial system that has improved dramatically in terms of A, transparency, B, self-custody and security, and then C, inflationary like monetary policy. Those are the actual like virtues of crypto. And then in order to support that and help change the narrative, we need to bring about significantly more transparency and actually move away from the shadowy, pseudonymous, you know, hacker-ish activity to a place where there is significantly more openness about what's actually going on in all of these large organizations and institutions and with all these project insiders and so forth. And that's what Arkham is trying to build.
So do you think over time we're going to start seeing less anonymous figures, you know, active on crypto or like say social platforms?
Definitely. Maybe the absolute number doesn't go down, but I think the relative number will. So maybe right now, you know, let's say, I don't actually know what the number is. This is pure speculation, but bear with me on the example. Imagine now we have, I don't know, 20 to 30 anons for every 100 crypto users. As we add and onboard more of the world onto cryptocurrency, I believe that the future is that more and more of those people are going to be real name on crypto, not anonymous. They're going to be fully, you know, transparent. And so if that is the case, then you're going to get an imbalance of the number of anons and pseudonymous entities relative to the number of total users, right? So maybe in that world, it's then 1 out of 1,000 are anon, rather than it being 20 out of 100, right? And so I think that's the kind of general direction that crypto is moving in, and I think that actually is a perfect parallel to what the internet was like. I think the internet in like the early days, 80s, 90s, potentially even early 2000s, was significantly more pseudonymous, more mailing lists, no real names, no like profiles or anything online, kind of very pseudonymous like activity. And then over time, especially around that kind of 2005 to 2010 era, everything started moving towards real name, especially with the rise of things like Facebook and Instagram and all these kind of other services, Google accounts, where then there was less of an incentive to be pseudonymous, and everything then became kind of significantly more transparent, right? And now like basically everybody is under real name on the internet. So I think that's the kind of general direction that crypto is moving in. This is evidenced by, for example, like the rise of ENS, right? Like ENSs are super popular now. A bunch of people actually have their name as their ENS as well. And that wasn't available before, right? And so because it wasn't available before, people didn't do it. But now that it is, they think it's cool, and they're choosing to give up their pseudonymous nature in order to have this like cool identity on chain. And I think that that's the direction that everything else is going to move into.
Yeah, I will say I think we've all seen our fair share of funny ENS names. There's, I mean, you gotta love the identity part of it, right? Everyone just finding themselves through whether it's a name, whether it's a PFP, just really showing who they are on chain and off chain, right? It all ties in for those IRL conversations and meetups, and I think that's another reason why I could definitely see more docs people coming out. But that is an interesting take to look into, right? If we are going to have more people that just don't have an incentive to be anonymous, then yeah, I think we will start seeing more and more
Definitely.
people that way.
Definitely.
Now, a little bit into the cryptocurrency markets. Could you talk to me about how Arkham gathers data on the market? Like how do you guys build your database?
So it's all actually internal data. So basically, we actually collect information directly from the blockchain, process it, store it in a database, and then build systems to be able to query that data very, very quickly once it's been cleaned up and logged. And so it's basically all just done internally with direct data collection infrastructure from the blockchain.
Got it. Yeah, I was always curious about like how can I just look up somebody's Twitter and I just find their wallet, right?
Yeah, all that information is collected directly.
Got it. Now, let's say that you have to handle. Do you ever handle privacy concerns when you're tying wallet information to a certain account?
Well, the thing is that if there is any information that can be collected by Arkham that ties a person's identity to their blockchain wallet, by its very nature, it has been publicly broadcast. On the one hand, it has been publicly broadcast on chain when they make their transaction. You broadcast your transaction to every node in the network, right? And we're all equal participants in this network. It's been publicly broadcast there. And then second, it's been publicly broadcast in the sense that something is tying that person to that particular address, and they have posted it online in a way that can be collected by us, right? So there shouldn't be an expectation of privacy when you're broadcasting a public blockchain transaction and then making a public post somewhere on the internet associating that transaction or that wallet with your identity. In that sense, it's not private. We're not accessing any private information or or any private systems or anything like that. It's all public, right? And so it's like it's us just aggregating all of that information in one place, right? It would be no different than going one by one, checking addresses, then like running that address through Google and Twitter and blah 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 to see if anybody has ever mentioned it. We're just doing that algorithmically at scale.
Right, right. Okay, it makes a lot more sense. I did want to say I enjoy the tweets that you guys have been putting out, like the one that you recently put out about Ethereum co-founder sending like I think it was like 22,000 ETH to Kraken, right? And it's just you always have a conversation like these transactions may not have information on what they are, but I feel like each of them have a story. I feel like that's what you guys are kind of building here, right?
Yeah, we definitely are doing that. Like I said, it's a new way of looking at the blockchain information, right? We actually find that it's the next level of this compared to like, let's say, I don't know, trading view, like technical analysis or something. Like, I think that with this on-chain information and with the kind of stuff that we're able to post on Twitter, we tell way more of a story about like what's actually going on in the crypto market. And potentially like that even has something to do with price action. Like maybe there's a change in prices as an example. And so I think that like as a whole, we actually provide a much better sort of piece of research and information about what's going on chain than a bunch of the other tools that people use, like some of the technical analysis stuff to explain what's going on.
Now, when you're working on these, obviously, I'm not sure if you're the one, formulating these tweets or not, but do you guys ever come across points where, you might hold off on tweeting something just because of the ramifications of the news hitting?
No, I think the only time when we ever hold back on tweeting something is when we're not 100% confident that is true. But basically, if there is some like piece of information that is relevant and interesting and like good for people to know about, assuming that we have very high confidence that it's true and it's accurate info, we'll go ahead and publish it.
Yeah, as people always say, always verify, never trust, right? Now, I want to dive a little bit into the future plans that you have laid out for Arkham. Obviously, who knows where we'll be 5 years, maybe even the next year. But I want to talk about Arkham. Do you guys, have any intention or plans to launch a token by using the platform, or maybe that's integrated into future features or products that you guys are working on?
So right now, all of the features are just direct. All of our plans are just around building like the best possible platform. That's it. That's what we're focused on. That is what we're working towards. And as a whole, what we've been doing while we're in beta, as you've seen, is just shipping as much cool stuff as possible in order to acquire more users. And that remains like the only focus at the company. It's eventually building out our platform enough to where we can finally like exit beta and say like, look, like our platform is done. Like, look, it's still rough around the edges, right? I'm sure, just by using the platform, like you can run into bugs. There are certain areas where you like hover over a button that you expect to work, and it's like, hey, this feature will be released during our beta, right? So it's still a little rough around the edges. We really need to focus on that first, and make sure that all of that is done. And then afterwards, we can start thinking about, what the kind of longer term strategy is. But at least for now, the only thing that we are focused on is building the best product possible.
All right, thank you for the insight there. And you tell me if we can talk about this, but do we have any expectation what Arkham points are going to be used for?
There is currently not very much of a plan for that. I think that the Arkham Point ecosystem is a really good way of people to be able to track. Like we had a bunch of people who were asking us about the referrals, because we've had this referral program from the beginning for the beta, right? Like when we went into beta, we're like, okay, how do we handle like scalability? Like how do we handle like people placing a huge load on our server, like on our computation? How do we deal with all the computation costs if we get like a bunch of people joining? And so basically we're like, okay, we're going to launch this thing in private beta. And then as we release more and more features, then at some point we'll go public. What ended up actually happening was we went into private beta and then like we ended up gaining way more users than I would have ever imagined in a very short period of time. And that was partially through kind of our go-to-market strategy and just word of mouth from people, right? And so we implemented this referral feature. We're like, okay, if we're in private beta, how do we actually decide which people come in, which people come out? We can't do everything on our own. So we gave users the ability to invite people. And then what ended up happening was we got a bunch of feedback basically being like, hey, how can I track the people who I've invited? Right? Because we didn't give out unlimited invites, because if you have unlimited invites, then like what's the point of being in beta? You might as well open up the platform. And so we're like, okay, 10 seems like a good number for each person. But then what ended up happening was everybody was like, okay, I have these 10 invites, I'm sending them out, but I want a way to track the number of invites I've sent out, the number of invites that have been accepted versus like not accepted. And I want to like be able to keep track of like my activity with these like invitations and and how many people clicked my referral link and all this kind of stuff. And so we're like, wow, like an ecosystem is actually developing around these invitations and around these referrals, right? So why don't we give the user more of an ability to see like who everybody who accepted their invites were, like the direct invites, how many people accepted the referral link, like et cetera, et cetera. And so that's why we built out that dashboard. And as part of that, we're like, okay, well, one very easy way to kind of track how good you are, like, the next thing was kind of like this competitive element of like people wanted to know, like, okay, relative to other people, like how many referrals have gotten accepted, right? Like maybe I'm like the number one referee of, the Arkham ecosystem. And so we built this point system out where now you can kind of track how you stack up relative to every other person who has referred people or invited people. And then you can kind of get a sense of how you stack up. And so that's why we kind of built that whole ecosystem.
Gotcha. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, as you're working on the platform, I know we talked about it a little bit earlier before we started, but you recently launched Dashboards V2, which involve a new couple of options that you can affect on your dashboard, creating it even more complex with the text notes. I think it was coin price as well. What are some of the features that you enjoy about that, and what might you see coming in the future?
I think that we want to give people, like, again, as I've said before, the number one thing that we have been trying to do is create a platform where there is a ability to be as simple or as complex as you want, right? And so as part of this, one of the things that we're trying to do is make it so that you can make your dashboards as complicated or as easy as you want them to be. Potentially one direction we might head is allowing users to like potentially even program directly within the platform, right? And then they have the ability to build whatever dashboard they want natively via our UI without even needing to use the API. And so that's a kind of interesting direction that I see. I also think that we might build in something like a news feed. Like this has been a very requested feature on our end, just like, hey, can you guys like pre-build dashboards for us or pre-build alerts or, et cetera, so that I don't even have to do the work. I can just come in and see what you guys think is interesting. So we might do something like that as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too, right? I love that there's all these features, but sometimes I feel like I might get lost in it, right? Like I don't know which features I could probably benefit the most. So maybe like having templates that you can build off of just to get you started, and then you can kind of just obviously just place the input to see what you want to track or what you want to stay ahead on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel like it's a good number of people have that experience of coming in and then having that question of like, what do I look for? How do I actually find alpha? And so we've had this request of maybe you guys can pre-build the alpha for us, and then we can just check in every day.
Now, as you're building new features and new tools, do you ever plan to create like a pro model of Arkham where you would charge for services?
We've thought about this before. I think that, a lot of this is still up in the air. We kind of have this overall question of like, okay, like, maybe in the future we can offer like more bespoke services, maybe have certain, additional features that are more like computationally intensive or something behind a paywall, if there is like a professional market for it. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of still up in the air. Like I mentioned, for now, we're mostly just focused on finishing the beta and like getting our platform like whipped up into shape for a kind of like true public launch where then anybody can get on. They don't need an invite. And then after that, I think we'll probably start thinking about like, okay, what are the more kind of advanced features and things that we could ship to a more kind of professional, sophisticated class of investor. And like, what does that kind of market look like?
Absolutely. And I also wanted to ask you, I mean, the space changes so much so frequently. Um, how do you guys plan to stay ahead of the market? Whether it's a new competitor or a brand new feature that everybody's going crazy over, do you guys plan to adapt to some of these features that people might need, or just more so streamline what you guys have planned down the road?
Yeah, we're always adapting, we're always launching new stuff. We ship very, very quickly. And so we adapt, we listen to customer feedback, right? Like the majority of this platform has been built as a result of customer feedback, not because we set out this large kind of vision and then have just been working our way through that roadmap. Like that's not true, right? Like the majority of everything that has been built on Arkham has actually just been a result of people asking us and us seeing patterns in what people are requesting, and then going ahead and submitting that stuff, right? And actually creating it and shipping it. And so, yeah, we've been adapting quite a lot to the market environment, and there's always some new piece of information that people are looking for. And so that's how we're intending to ship this stuff. I think dashboards will be a really good place to watch all this new information, because as we add new units, that'll be like a real-time impression of what people have been requesting and what people think is useful. And so I think that that will kind of be the evidence of our ability to ship things as new information comes in the market.
So as you start creating new tools, have you ever given the thought of having focus groups or feedback um, groups to test potential products on? Or do you guys usually just test everything in house and then launch it at a later date?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we've ever thought about like doing groups, mostly because we get hundreds of messages per day across like Twitter, Telegram, Discord, and email of like users yelling at us and being like, either this is broken, or like, please add this, or, I expected this feature to do X, but it actually does Y, which is a signal that, you should probably build X. And so, we get a lot of inbound about this stuff. And then it's just trying to figure out a signal from the noise. Like, what's the stuff that we get yelled at 50 times a day about? Right. Rather than these sort of like one-offs where, sometimes I'll hear about a feature, like a feature request, and then I won't hear about it for like another 6 months from a different person. Sometimes we'll launch something and then I'll get 50 feature requests per day up until we launch that feature, right? And then it goes away. So that is like a much stronger signal that something needs to get built and it's worth building. And so we're basically just sifting through all of the inbound for the best stuff, see what we agree is like good, test the technical feasibility of what's being requested, and then ship it internally. And then it goes to production if it's good enough.
Got it. Okay. The reason I asked early on when we were working with Blur, I think it was last May or June. We were the first community onboarded onto their platform. So there was this time where we were just testing out their platform directly and just giving constant feedback. And it was neat being able to provide feedback on features that they either needed or they could have improved upon, and then just getting that constant feedback through an organized channel. So yeah, that's why I was just curious. Maybe I didn't know if you guys were working with any communities specifically to do something like that.
Yeah, I think most of it just comes from all of the different channels that we have available where people can directly interact with our team. People in the community can directly interact with our team. So that's basically the way in which we are currently soliciting feedback.
Great. Well, I had an amazing conversation today. I wanted to give a little bit of time to answer questions if anybody had questions. I do see that our great Top Hat Cat dropped one for us. He's asking, are there any plans to add Discord webhook integration along with Telegram?
Yes, this is actually being built right now.
There you have it, THC. You're going to have it soon. Now, as we wait to see if there's any more questions popping up, I don't currently see anyone typing. What are some of the things that you're most excited for that you guys are working on?
That's a good question. I think probably I actually am pretty excited about adding Tron. There's been a bunch of kind of information about like Tron TRC20 USDT transactions. And that's been, I feel like, a very kind of opaque market slash overall like expansion that I know absolutely nothing about. Like I didn't even know that there was a bunch of volume happening in TRC20 until like I spoke to enough people outside of the West who, whenever like we wanted to have a crypto transaction, they were appalled that I would want to send them USDT on Ethereum because they're like the fees are too high. And then I was like, oh wow, this thing actually has like real adoption and like traction. So I'm very interested to look at all of the on-chain data and analytics via Arkham, in particular for like the USDT transactions on Tron. And I think Tron will be coming out like sometime in the next 10 days or so.
Interesting. So maybe we'll see some Tron integration. All right. Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up for today. I just wanted to kind of circle back and talk through some of the points that we covered today, right? Started off talking about, what Arkham is about, everything that they've worked on so far. We got to dive into some of their long-term goals. May not look into the 10 years, but hey, we definitely have some good runway for the next 5 years and what they have planned. We talked about the importance of transparency in crypto. We really dove into how you guys acquire this database, how you guys build these systems for information, and providing tools for everyone to just create. Right. I think the most important thing about this all is just creating systems and new dashboards and use cases for this data to just be digested. It can seem very daunting when we're on Etherscan just looking at transactions for the first time, but when we have a very easy and UI friendly UI to use, that's when you'll start seeing a lot more interaction with the overall market to the point where it becomes a daily thing. And then we rounded it out with a couple questions that we usually run into. With the future, maybe there's a token. Currently, just focusing on optimizing their platform and making sure they are crushing on all fronts. And just want to bring it back again to say thank you. I had a wonderful time talking to you today. And if you have any last thoughts that you want us to leave us on, feel free to share.
Yeah, that's everything. Thank you guys for having me. This was a lot of fun, and yeah, looking forward to staying connected with the community.
Wonderful. Thank you. I hope you have a wonderful day. And thank you all for tuning in today to our Arkham AMA. Catch y'all later.
Thanks, everyone.